My name is Abby Rappaport. I'm the publisher of Stranger's Guide. We're an award-winning publication that commissions stories from local writers and photographers to build authentic portraits of place from Scandinavia and Tehran to Colombia and Lagos. Learn more about what we do at strangersguide.com. I'm excited today to introduce our speakers. Michael Abels is best known for his scores for the Oscar-winning film Get Out and for Jordan Peele's Us, for which Abels won the World Soundtrack Award, the Jerry Goldsmith Award, a Critics' Choice nomination, an Image Award nomination, and multiple Critics Awards. The hip-hop influenced score for Us was shortlisted for the Oscar and was named Score of the Decade by the online publication The Wrap. As a concert composer, Abels has received grants from the National Endowment for the Arts, Meet the Composer, and the Sphinx Organization, among others. His orchestral works have been performed by Chicago Symphony, the Cleveland Orchestra, the Atlanta Symphony, the Philadelphia Orchestra, and many more. Bill Adair is the Knight Professor of Journalism and Public Policy at Duke University and the creator of the Pulitzer Prize-winning website PolitiFact. At Duke, he conducts research on new ways to expand fact-checking and combat misinformation. He worked for 24 years as a reporter and editor for the Tampa Bay Times, formerly the St. Petersburg Times, and served as the paper's Washington bureau chief from 2004 to 2013. Please join me in welcoming them both to the stage.
All right. Hey.
I'm so glad we're doing this. Well, thank you, Abby. Loved Abby's introduction. One thing that Abby didn't know about was that Michael and I go way back. We met in third grade, and Michael taught me a word that I didn't know as a third grader, boycott. So when I was over at Michael's house playing one day, Michael was outraged because they were raising the price of candy bars from 5 cents to 10 cents. And I was like, what's this about? And Michael's like, we need to boycott candy bars.
Right.
And
Fight the power.
and so, as you can see, with candy bars now, something like $1. Michael's skills are maybe not in political organizing, because I don't think the boycott works so well, but he is an incredible musical talent, and that was clear back then. I just remember at that stage seeing your piano, seeing you play piano, and just thinking, you just have an amazing talent. And so we're going to talk about that today. And I think the other thing that you need to know about Michael is a little story about Steven Spielberg. So after Get Out came out, Steven Spielberg called Jordan Peele and had a very detailed conversation with Jordan Peele about the film and mentioned in particular the score and talked about Michael's music and said something to this effect that I have John Williams, you have Michael Abels. And so Michael Abels is Jordan Peele's John Williams, and we are honored to have you with us today to talk about your work. So
Thank you.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
So let's start just with some general questions, and then we're going to play some clips and talk a little bit about Get Out and Us, and then Alan V. Farrow, which you won 2 Emmy nominations for. Nominations.
One a nomination. Yes.
So many of us feel drawn to our careers. Did you feel drawn to music that way?
I was drawn to music, like some of my earliest memories are of music, like before I could walk or talk, I think. And I didn't know it could be a career. I didn't have any concept of that, but I was just always very emotionally drawn to music whenever I heard it. So because of my interest in music, I was just always doing music because I was fascinated. And it seemed like a logical career, but it was just out of a love of music more than anything else.
And I can't remember, were your parents really the force? Were they pushing you to take piano lessons, and or how much of this at that stage in grade school was sort of self-motivated. How did you develop your skills at that stage?
Well, so before we met, I was living with my grandparents on a farm in South Dakota. And there was a spinet piano in the farmhouse, and my grandmother would play. And I just assumed that, adults could, you could play the piano, it's part of what you did. So when I finally I was trying to play Do, Re, Mi. I loved that song. And it didn't sound right when I went to play it at age 4. And I asked my grandma, what's the problem with this? This instrument is not doing what it's supposed to. She said, well, you have to take lessons. And so I said, well, sign me up. So my parents were always very encouraging. But the motivation to start at least came from me. But then as a kid, if you're doing something and you get a little better and adults praise you and you think, oh, then you get in that positive feedback loop and then you run with it.
Now, as a writer, I feel that feedback, or maybe it's almost like a creative energy when I write. And if I don't write for a while, I miss, it's almost that tactile sensation of writing. Do you feel that when you, like on the piano keys, that it's almost like, for me, like electricity or something? Do you feel that when you're playing?
It's similar. I don't necessarily feel it when I'm playing, but I feel it when I hear music, when I have an idea for music. And the best ideas don't feel like I'm having them. It feels like they're coming, like I'm the transcriber of the idea. And there's a great idea, and I'm the only one who can hear it, and it's my job to transcribe it as well as I hear it in my head, And when I'm in that zone of listening to what that music is and transcribing it, I feel like I'm blessed with the idea that has been given to me, And it's exciting to think that I'm the first person to hear it, and that I just want it to be when I explain it to people, basically, that it's as good as I was told it could be, if that makes sense. But that's the electricity feeling that you're in the zone. I have it, absolutely.
How is it different when you are collaborating with someone, whether it's Jordan Peele for a film or Rhiannon Giddens for the new opera that hopefully we'll talk about in a little bit, where it's much more of a collaboration versus something that you just do on your own? Is it a different feeling? Is it a different kind of creative process?
So what I've noticed is that in creation there's a couple parts to it, and it helps, at least for me, to distinguish those parts by different words, rather than just calling it all creation. There's creation, and then there's curation, which is like editing, I would guess. But you need to edit as you create. Like sometimes you do both at the same time. And when I'm writing and I'm in charge of the curation, then I'm always curating. I have an idea and I'm analyzing, is this any good, or what can I do with this idea? Those sorts of thoughts feel like creation, but they're really kind of taking raw material and shaping it, right? When you're collaborating, often what the collaborator's doing is the curation. Or maybe I'm only doing the first pass of the curation, if that makes sense. And the other person's doing the real curation. So I have to switch my thinking and know not to curate the ideas as closely as I might, because that's the other person's job. So my job is to just create and not be as critical as I might be, because their input is part of what's going to create the finished product. So,
is that more satisfying, less satisfying? How do you, as a creative person, judge all these different things?
It's both, because if it's going well, then it's terrific. Sometimes if it's rocky, then it's not. But that's true regardless of whether I'm doing the curation. If I have an idea and it's not working, I'm by myself in my failure to execute, you know. So in each case, when the ideas are flowing and you feel like you're going toward the goal, then it's great.
Let's, before we play the clip from Get Out, let's tell the story of how you started your collaboration with Jordan Peele. How did he discover you, so to speak? How did that collaboration begin?
Well, so I'd always wanted to score films because I always consider music to be storytelling, regardless of whether it's a song or a symphonic work or just name it. It's storytelling in some way. But I hadn't had much traction in the industry. So, but I'd had some concert pieces that I'd written, and they were on YouTube. And Jordan, and I had, dozens of hits, but one of them turned out to be Jordan Peele, who had never directed at that time, at least not a film, and was looking for someone to score his first film who could write in a style, a dissonant, scary, mid-20th century orchestral style, but also understood the Black experience. And so I think in that way he was kind of looking for me, which is great to imagine, right? So he had one of the production supervisors hunt me down and call me, and I got a cold call from someone saying he was a producer, which in LA, if you get a call from a producer, you don't really believe that they're a producer. But it turned out he had an IMDb profile, so I thought it was a really good punk if I was being punked. Someone had bothered to create a backstory, So I called him back, and what happened was I got sent what was to be the Oscar-winning script for Best Screenplay, just cold. And it was an incredible screenplay. And then I met Jordan, and he's just as smart and funny in real life as he is in interviews. And you realize, it's so important in the work you do to just love the people that you work with, or to respect them and enjoy working with them. And it was clear to me, like, this opportunity is just extraordinary. So I was thrilled to do anything he asked. If he, the fact that he wanted me to participate, I was totally a yes. So.
And had you been a big fan of horror movies before this?
No. I mean, they terrified me. I was the kind of kid who had nightmares all night, at G-rated movies, because someone said something that scared me, and then I would have nightmares. So, and in fact, one time in college, I went to a triple feature, deliberately to scar myself. I went to they used to have these triple features of horror movies, and watched 6 hours of horror movies back to back. And it actually kind of worked. I was scarred enough that I could deal, and I didn't know how much it would pay off later, but it did. And but I think it helps me because I'm legitimately terrified, by scenes that are horrifying. I'm horrified, and so you're writing music for media. I feel like I'm acting through my art. I'm not an actor, but through the music, I can depict emotion. And so I feel like my feeling helps me create the music that I do.
As we were preparing, I was working with some of my students to watch the clips and think about what I should ask you. And it was just a reminder of how scary some of the scenes are, and even that are just ordinary scenes. It's not, and suddenly, who knew that rabbits could be so terrifying, until you rewatch Us, These are scary films.
It's really, Jordan is an absolute genius in so many ways, and he has, I feel like I know what, you know your own emotions, so you know what's scary, you can name, any of us can name things, but Jordan has this way of, I think he likes to ruin things for people. He has not said this, but this is as I watch him work, he'll take something like rabbits or like in Us, it was one of the things he was ruining. And sometimes from a script, I can get what something's about, but I can't always. And so at one time during Us, I said to him, "What's with the rabbits?" And he just said, "They scare me." And it was in that way that was like, what do you see? Like, there's no follow-up to that. It's just like that was a fact. And he has a way of taking the things that terrify him and making us understand why any rational person would be terrified by his nightmares. So,
well, based on the trailer to Nope, we have a whole new set of things that apparently must scare him. So, let's start and play the clip. And this is the main title from Get Out, which really kind of sets the stage. So if we can play that clip, and then we'll talk about it.
I'm TS motherfucking A. We handle shit. That's what we do. Consider this situation. Fucking handle.
and it just repeats. We can cut it.
Yeah, we can. Okay.
Yeah. Now you've heard it twice.
I tell you, it really helped to put them together like that because I'd been watching just the beginning, and to
See the bookend of
to
the
see the
beginning and
bookend
end.
is really powerful. So let's start. Tell us about the process of writing that. How does it begin? What did Jordan tell you he wanted? Tell us about that process.
Great. So first thing to know is that's a main title, which means the main piece of music for the credits. Jordan did the credits of that film old school, meaning they're at the beginning, rather than at the end is kind of more traditional now. And so that's not scored to picture. A lot of, if you see a scene in a film, the music is designed to go with that scene. But this was done before the scene was shot. So this was after our first meeting. We had a talk about the script and about, he's really insightful about he's very academic about knowing, like he knows what works. Every idea he has, he knows why it works, which is not true of every creative person, So he said, I wanted to have the African-American voice both literally and metaphorically. He said it has to be scarier than shit, And he said, but the problem with African American music is that it all has an undercurrent of hope, which I had never heard anyone say. And I just thought that was really insightful. But then he said, and you have to drain all the hope right out of it. And that was like all in one sentence. And so I said, I think you're talking about gospel horror. And neither one of us knew what that meant, but we liked the idea of that. You know, if that was a thing, that would be a cool thing. So, so I went home and I did a couple demos so that the producers wouldn't fire me when Jordan told them that he wanted to hire his little internet friend, you know. And I did a couple demos, and this was one of them. And so what it is, and then there's another thing Jordan talked about was about how the things that scare us are the things that are unfamiliar. And so you look at, now I was, you know, when I was a little kid, I was with my grandparents in the country on a farm. So the countryside is not a scary thing to me. Chris Washington, the character in this film, is a city boy. The country is unfamiliar to him and scary. And so the idea was to depict that countryside as being a foreboding, unknown place. And so I thought, well, it needs to have kind of a little bit of a country music vibe, but country music as regarded by an African-American city boy, you know, like, well, those are the other people, and we don't know about the other people, and their music is just one more example, right? So that's the country vibe of it. But then there have to be African-American voices, so it's clearly black people singing. And then the idea is that they're ghosts, and they're trying to warn Chris. And they're ghosts of, you know, lynching victims and former slaves and every victim of injustice. And so they're trying to warn Chris, and what are they saying? Of course, they're saying, get out. But ghosts don't speak to us in English. They speak to us in, you know, shadow and metaphor. So I chose Swahili because, it turns out most slaves, I did some fact checking, and I guess most of the enslaved Swahili wasn't their first language, but I needed some artistic license, and Swahili is very musical. So I chose Swahili, and then I made a series of phrases that they might say, and I found the ones that were most musical, and I put them in there. So the words are, first, brother, because when one black person throughout this world says brother to another, you know what that means. So it's brother, sikiliza kwa wahenga, listen to the ancestors. Kimbia, run. Kuokoa mwenyewe, save yourself. And they're saying that to him, and they're just urging him to get out. So
that's fascinating. The plucking, it's really interesting to hear your description of the Chris's urban take on the country. My take was it had sort of a Deliverance feel to it, you know, the same sort of...
The country.
Yeah, fascinating. So when I was over at your house and you were showing me another film that you had done, you showed me the back and forth of the initial
my initial demo and
things.
then how it changed, yeah.
Talk about this a little bit. At how many versions were there, and at what point did Jordan start matching your music with what he had shot?
So this was one that he liked immediately, and in terms of the words and all that, there weren't any changes. And this is almost the demo. It's just a better mix of what the demo was. So, and I didn't know what. Because it was a demo, I didn't know it was the main, you know, he was the one who, when I went to see the rough cut months later, then here was this music in that section, and I thought, well, okay, well, I'm not fired right now, you know, I'm still got the job, so.
And had he envisioned from the beginning that it would also be the end title music also?
Well, I think he's inspired by some classic suspense and horror films, and one of them is Rosemary's Baby. And I think Rosemary's Baby has a piece of music that is both the beginning and the end. And so I think he was inspired a little by, you know, he is very much a student of films that he respects, and he studies their structure and why they work. So I think he might have been inspired by that, but I had no idea that he was, I think he just did, I mean, he tried it. I think he did it because it was working.
We were talking at lunch about something we've discussed a little bit before that I had forgotten about, that you do concerts of the score from Get Out to the film, where you are the conductor and you have a live orchestra and a chorus that does the music as the film plays. Talk about that a little bit. I just find that fascinating, and it's got to be so challenging to time the music to the film properly and hit all the right cues. When I think about Get Out, and even just the scenes that come right after this, when they get to the parents' house and the music is just so timed, talk about how you do that. That sounds really challenging.
Well, it's really fun, and I get a little nervous. There's a click track, and if you're not a musician, there's just it's what you have when there is no music. There's a click, and the click is what's used to sync up to everything to the video. So I'm on headset with a click, and some of the orchestra is, and then all the music as it was timed when we made the film, it's just recreated live in that way. And the version of the film that's projected is one that has all the dialogue and all the sound, but none of the music, and so we recreate it like that.
And so a mutual friend reminded us they're doing that coming up in Baltimore. Is this going to be happening more and more around the country, or?
I mean, I hope so. I'm not conducting the one in Baltimore, and that might be the first one where I'm not conducting, or they might have. I wouldn't know if they don't hire me. As the composer, you do your work and then it exists, and so. It depends on each market and when they want to do it. They do a lot of there are other films. It's becoming a popular type of concert now, which I think is great because it helps people enjoy live music, especially a lot of live symphonic music, in a way that they hear it very often and hadn't really. You really think about all the time that goes into making music for film when you see it created live and you realize the name, a lot of times the names of the whole orchestra isn't even in the crawl of the film. So when you see all the musicians, you just realize, wow, the amount of thought that goes into this.
Right. Speaking of the names of the orchestra, so when I was over at your house, you were explaining and showing me that often the recording of the orchestra is in Europe. Explain that a little bit and how that works, because I thought you would go into a studio in Hollywood and record, but that's not how it goes.
Well, you ideally, if you have a big enough budget, you can do that. But
I guess John Williams probably.
John Williams does that. Yes, but there are also many other countries where you can record remotely, and it used to be that you had to go, but now you don't even have to go. Just through a powerful internet link, you are there and you can hear the music, and so the music, the live part of the music for Get Out was recorded in Budapest, and the singers were here. The singers were here in LA, and then we just put it all together. So
cool. So let's switch gears and talk about rabbits, so before we play the first clip from us, Jordan allowed you on the set for us, or invited you to the set.
He allowed me. Yeah.
Talk about.
I snuck in even uninvited.
Talk about that a little bit, and how that informed how you wrote the score for us.
Well, composers usually are only involved in post-production, meaning after the film is shot, and so the actors and the makeup people and the photographer, the DP, they all get to be part of this great group. They've got a goal and they bond over this experience they've had. And composers are all in the dark by themselves afterward. And you get to the premiere and you see the actor like, hey, and that person's like, who are you? So going on the set, I got to be part of the team, and that was cool. In terms of the music, the Anthem, which is the first piece from us, was again something I wrote beforehand. And I was told that Jordan played that for the actors to kind of give them some sonic context. And it's cool to, you know, in pre-production, always you have to pick out the look of a film because you're going to be filming it. But you don't have to pick out the sound of a film. But Jordan always likes to start designing that as best he can, and music is a part of that. And so it's great to feel like I'm on the team. And also you can see, the thing about when you're on the set, there are things from a script, you can't tell how a film's going to look. It doesn't matter how it's described. You can't tell how dark or light a film is, and things like that affect the music. And so being on set, and when I saw the colors of the house where the characters went for their beach holiday, it was all these dark woods, and I had no idea that it would be a dark wooden house until I was there and saw it. So.
It's interesting growing up when we did some of the flashbacks to the Hands Across America stuff and whatever it was like. That was our growing up. You know, that was when we were eating 5-cent candy bars. So it was.
They were probably a quarter by then.
All right, so let's play Anthem, the main title from Us. All right, so let's do the same thing here. What did Jordan tell you he wanted, and what were you? I mean, it's just a wonderful opening in that you've, and of course there's a fair amount that comes before that, where there's the setup. If you, those of you who've seen the film, remember there's the setup of the Hands Across America commercial, and they're at the amusement park. So this is really the introduction of the real horror, where you're like, whoa. Mm-hmm. So tell us what he was asking for.
So he said, for the beginning of this film, he said, so obviously it's about duality, the film in general. He said, so give me some examples of instruments that don't belong together. So I started doing demos of instruments that don't belong together, and just like he truly invites, creative. He wants a creative conversation, and so I was providing him rather than curate. Was saying, how about this? How about that? And there needed to be. He was going to do a main title, and so there needed to be a piece of music that gave us the feeling that something bad is coming, but it's organized. Okay, right? And see that like that's much more scary than just something bad is coming. Something organized that's coming that's bad is really bad. So, how do you do that? And so it reminds me of an army, of a march. And so nothing says armies like marches, right? But it can't be. But it was important that it be a multicultural march. And so you think about that, you think, there's certain cultures that march. Not all cultures are into the marching thing. And so how do you march for cultures that don't march? And Jordan said that the words should be nonsense. They shouldn't be anything. I thought, oh, well, that'll be easy. That's great. And then when I went to write the words, I realized, you know what? There's no such thing as nonsense. Like everything means something. And because think about a baby cries, the first thing you have to do is figure out what it means, right? Every sound that you make means something. So I had all these realizations about how this wasn't going to be that easy. But here's how I solved it. It was like, well, so marches have this a certain rhythm, and you can't get out of that or it's not a march. And certain languages have that rhythm too, and you can't get out of that. And when you put those two things together, it's kind of gonna sound Latin or West. The words sound Latin or kind of Western European because marching, right? But I thought, well, okay, so the multicultural part is it's gonna go really slow, much slower than a real march, and it's gonna have a beat that makes you wanna go like this. And that's gonna be the multicultural spin on it, is that it's a really funky march. So, and then also Jordan said, once again, he said, it's got to have children's voices, he says. Because why? Because they're sweet or they're creepy and scary, depending on how you look at it. So these were the things I had to do, and there was the way I solved it. And this one wasn't the immediate it wasn't like immediately he knew. I think he listened to this a while and tried it on and sort of figured out because I was thinking of doing more voices in different cultures, but that made it seem, I don't know, it took away from the power of hearing this, and there's space between every one of the syllables, and that space has this power of its own. And so to add different sorts of vocal inflection from other cultures was going to fill up that space. So I chose not to do that, and that's.
So were there many versions, or you were just sort of, here's a smorgasbord of a bunch of different sounds, and he picked between them, and you sort of refined it?
No, there was another version of this, but this was a small revision, and it's hard to explain. But there was a section in the middle that wasn't as. When you listen to this now, it's got this very steady build to it, to the end. And in my original version, there was a middle section that didn't quite curve up, and that note was, that section, I'm losing interest right, fix that so it's, and that was a great note. That's an example of curation. That's like, when it was pointed out to me, I'm like, oh yeah, I gotta fix that. But the only difference between the demo and this version is that there's live strings on this, so they're in the background, you may not hear them. But then when I mock it up, I have to use fake voices, which are really sad sounding.
How do you get a fake voice?
It's all through digital sampling. It's all, composers have libraries of every sound ever recorded, just like terabytes of sound. And you have to pick one out from the vast library and put it in. And when you spend the time to do that, it's actually remarkable what you can do virtually. Like the drums on that track are virtual. Yeah.
And then where do you get a chorus of creepy children?
Yeah, there's a really great creepy children's school in Santa Monica. Question. Well, it's really, creepy is in the ear of the beholder, actually. Like, first you go to a vocal contractor and she hires children who can sing. I don't think those children think of themselves as creepy. I think their parents think they're well adjusted. But it's what you give them to do, the context you put them in that makes them freak people out.
All right, we're going to play the other scene from Us. And we should just remind everybody, probably most of you have seen the film, this is a pretty graphic scene. So if you need to, you may want to close your eyes and just listen to Michael's tremendous music.
Oh, yeah. Thanks.
I've watched that scene 20 times. It's a masterpiece. It's so good. Talk about at what point did he say they're going to, well, why don't you explain a little bit what's happening there for those of us who might not have either seen the film or it's been a while.
Well, so that's the film is about duality. There are people called the tethered who look like us, but they haven't had any of the privileges that we've had. And they've been forced to live underground and have access to nothing. And they get out. They get out of their tetheredness. And the question is, would they be jealous enough of any of us to want to hurt us? And turns out they are. And they do. So that's Adelaide, played by Lupita Nyong'o, confronting her doppelganger, who is just called Red. And it's the final battle, right? And So that's where the duality is played out in its full. So that's why the piece of music is called pas de deux, because that's a dance of two, except it's not a dance, except it is because she was a dancer. And so in the montage, you see cut together her as a ballerina growing up, cut with, there's scenes of, if you see the ballerina down in the sad hallway, that's the tethered version of her dancing without, you know, kind of with the broken spirit of the tethered. And then you see the adult Adelaide and Red battling it out in a battle that is not a dance, and yet it is, you know. So there's all this duality and different layers of things. And then the music is actually, I Got 5 on it by Lunas, but which is not even that. That's really Why'd You Treat Me So Bad by Club Nouveau from the 70s, and that was sampled in Lunas. And then I'm arranging that for string orchestra. So there's all these levels of how this piece got filtered through. And then there's Nick's editing. I mean, that's why it's really a music video. And it's because of Nick's editing, which he did so many times of that scene, I can't even tell you. So and it's Jordan's idea to take, like he likes to ruin things, right? So ruining Got 5 on it is one of Jordan's ideas. So he's saying it should go, you know, boom, doot, 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 you know. So I feel I'm really just the arranger of those, then the head music arranger in charge of collaborating to that, if that makes any sense.
Was it, now when we've talked about this one before, we've often said, well, when we were going to do this panel a couple of years ago, this was sort of our last clip, like, maybe we won't do this. Was this one, because it involves so much other music, was it less satisfying as a composer because you're bringing in so many other people's work? You're more the curator?
I think I have a little bit of you know, it's Club New, you know, it's these other things, and I'm collaborating in a different way, you know, but that's it. It just goes to show, as a film composer, the things that you do. Some of them are, you know, the idea comes, you know, you're the beginning of the spark, and other places you're facilitating someone else's idea and you're helping them realize something that they've come up with, you know, and sometimes you're responding, like a lot of what, whereas like where you see the Anthem and it's one long shot, right? And I didn't know what the shot was going to be of the rabbits, and then they took the picture and they made it match the music by having the titles pop on in rhythm with the music, and that's just a small thing they can do to make them sync together. But in this piece, Nick would edit it, and the just every cut would be different, and then I'd change the music to make sure that it looked like it always went that way. And the spaces in the beginning where it's da dun 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 dun, you know, that space is what makes you watch, because you know it's coming, but you don't know when. And we changed that just hundreds of times to get it just right as he was doing that. So anyway, so there's an example where I'm following other people and helping them create something that they had the idea of.
All right, let's go to our final clip, which you were nominated for an Emmy. This is from the HBO series Alan v. Pharaoh, and this is the opening title.
This is a story of two of the biggest stars in the world.
The father is Woody Allen, writer, director, actor. The mother is Mia Farrow, his frequent co-star, and the mother of his 3 children, 2 of them adopted.
Woody and Mia have been together for 12 years but never married and kept separate residences.
She reportedly has a video of their adopted daughter Dylan explaining how Alan molested her. Alan denies child abuse, but freely admits he's in love with another of Pharaoh's daughters, 21-year-old Suni.
Alan said the newest allegations are the bizarre concoctions of a woman scorned.
Ms. Pharaoh's only
I love the way that builds in intensity and the layers of that. Talk about the challenge of this as this was your first nonfiction, so to speak, score.
Well, so it's, where should I start with that? So first, the main title is kind of like, it's the same assignment as it would be for anything else in some ways, in that you're setting up a story in a short period of time, and you see these images of the Stahlhaus and you hear the journalist speaking, and the feeling I'm trying to communicate is some of exactly what you said, how it builds in intensity. I remember when this story broke in the press in the 90s, and it was very complicated with many different levels, and it played on the level of two really famous celebrities who, and then it played on the level of people, allegations of child molestation and how that just offends everybody, and then there was the media thing around that. So it has all these layers. So the music's trying to communicate that as like, this is a serious thing, and it just keeps sort of spinning and going deeper, and there's more layers to it. And that's where the kind of the emotional inspiration of the music came from that. In terms of scoring a documentary, there are, fortunately there's a lot of journalistic cred and things that go into that. And fortunately, that wasn't my job. Amy's in charge of that. But I really thought about I thought more than anything I ever had, what is editorializing? And that's not even a word that I've had to use in my vocabulary very much. But I think that the music does editorialize, and it just does it in a way that, first of all, the directors are in charge of making sure that they don't editorialize in a way that's not appropriate to the piece. But when you're telling a story, like this is a series, so it has different components. There's the component of Woody and Mia's love story, which is completely out of a Woody Allen movie. It's a Woody Allen movie, and so I got to write cues that were just like two celebrities fall in love in late 20th century New York, and the pan to the cityscape and the music that's very,
And it sounds like Manhattan.
Exactly,
Yeah.
It's a real life Manhattan. So I did those scenes, and I'm editorializing, they're in love, and it's New York, and it's beautiful. But then there are the very intimate and uncomfortable scenes of Dylan as a child talking about what happened. And in those scenes, oh my gosh, you underplay that, because the only thing more horrifying than a horror movie is real life horror, and you don't need to exaggerate that. So then that's just completely going the opposite direction. And then there's scenes of like the family, home movies of the whole family together. It's very happy and warm, and play that emotion because that was legit. And then there's the journalistic part where there's people talking about case evidence and the sort of left brain stuff. And in that case, it's not editorializing that the music does, but it's a lot of detail that would possibly make an audience just lose track or bore them. So then the music needs to have a kind of momentum to it that's allowing us to feel like the details are worth us, that they're leading somewhere. So you're editorializing in a way that is helpful for the storytelling, let's say. So that's a long answer, but that's kind of how I...
Well, it's fascinating to hear the completely different challenges.
Yeah, completely.
Than doing a scripted film.
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you want to do another documentary?
Sure, because I care a lot about social justice, and there's opportunities to do that. I think I was spoiled in that Kirby and Amy have this amazing reputation as documentarians, and so I got to work with them right out of the gate. But yes, documentaries are really amazing, and I would do another one.
So we only have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to go to just a couple of questions here that are on the screen. Here's one. Are there any film scores that have particularly inspired or influenced your work? And if so, why?
Let's see. So for Get Out, I would say Bernard Herrmann, because I think of Get Out as being like a Hitchcock film. It's like Hitchcock's, you understand. So also those films have a real classic sound to it. And part of what the score to Get Out is telling you is that this film may have been shot for a little bit of money, but it's a big film, about big things. And so the score is telling you that without saying those words. Has other scores, but there are many other scores I love. I remember I saw Empire Strikes Back in the theater, and I saw Star Wars in the theater, but Empire Strikes Back is really an opera. The music is so masterful. So that was one that sticks out. There are others that I forget, and like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory has such a great score. I mean, Danny Elfman scores, like the ones you think of, but then there's one called Milk, which is just remarkable. There's so many wonderful scores.
Has your approach to composing changed since the beginning of your career?
There's one specific way in which it's changed, in that the first cues I did for Jordan in Get Out, I sent them in, and then I went and I met with him and the editor, and I watched them along with them so they could give me notes in person. And I said, the sync is late, meaning that the music was reacting later than where I had placed it. And they said, "Oh no, we like it that way." And I thought, I was really disappointed at that. Because you work to be able to do that. That's a skill. And to have them so unapologetically, like disregarding where I thought the music should go seemed crazy. But this is a longer story which I'll shorten. But they kept moving the cues, and Jordan would say, he said, just the audience needs time to react. And then one day, I said to him, "It's like thunder and lightning." And he said, "Yeah. First the lightning happens, and then you hear the thunder." And since I had that analogy, I just, like, something switched. And so now, like, I'm always like, how late can I put the reaction in the music and still have it seem like it's on time? And it really informed the way I look at film, and I learned so much just from that.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Let's do one more. Let's do one from the audience. Yes.
Is there anything you can say about the experience of scoring the upcoming film Nope?
And let me repeat the question because we didn't get you the mic. Is there anything that you can say about scoring Jordan's new film, Nope? I think the answer is probably going to be the title of the film.
Yeah. I mean, I can't wait for everyone to see it. I think it's wonderful. I'm incredibly biased. What else am I going to tell you? Also, right? So all those things, I'm thrilled to be working on it. I'm very excited.
So this has been a real treat. I have learned so much just in this hour. This has been fascinating. I just love talking to you.
Bill, I'm so privileged to be your friend. I just can't tell you how much I love being your friend.
Well,
so thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's thank Michael.
Thank you.